Well, we've made our way down through 3 of the 4 kinds of story weaving techniques: exposition, expectation, context, and now interpretation. Interpretation as a spatial technique deals with reversals, okay, as opposed to reveals, which were context. Context revealed things. Okay, interpretation has reversals on things. And in temporal techniques, they're flashbacks or flash forwards. Now let's look at the spatial technique, reversals, which is shifting context, not revealing context, but changing context, okay, to create surprise meaning. So, we're looking at Agnes Moorehead in a Twilight Zone episode called The Invaders. In that case, Agnes Moorehead plays what was for her at the time, being a big star at the time, a very unusual role. She went through the entire Twilight Zone episode and never uttered a word. She made sounds like, well, that's why I'm not Agnes Moorehead. That's not why I'm not a big star. She grunted, she groaned, she expressed pain, she expressed curiosity, but she didn't say a word. She was a lady living in a rundown cabin, alone, and wearing rundown clothes. Very poor, apparently. And she was cleaning up when all of a sudden a strange sound occurred and a thud on top of her roof. And she doesn't know what to make of it, but then there's another strange sound. She goes around a corner and here's this little 6-inch robot thing that comes around the corner, and she looks closely at it and gets down to see what it is, and it hits her with a little laser beam. And she's got a wound on her cheek. So she backs off and screams. She's afraid. It keeps coming after her. Eventually she gets the better of it and kills it. Then there's another one, and she goes after that and eventually kills that, beats it to death with a broom or something. And finally, she makes her way up to the attic where the sound was. And she gets up there to look around, and here's a little flying saucer. And she's coming in on the flying saucer to get it, at which point we hear over the radio in the flying saucer a report saying, "This is saucer X-14, don't land on this planet, it's populated by giants, most of the crew is dead, I'm the only one left alive, there's no hope if you land here, stay away." And we pull back as she smashes it to bits, and see on the side is a little American flag on the saucer. Now suddenly we've shifted the context of everything, and in shifting it, we now see that she is the alien, and that actually those little robot creatures were U.S. astronauts. The same kind of thing happens in Slaughterhouse-5. In Slaughterhouse-5, the wife of the character is driving like crazy and down a road and having all these mishaps, and it's absolutely hilarious. Very funny. That's how we interpret it, because one thing's getting knocked over, it's a very funny chase scene, as it were, only nothing's being chased, I guess. She's just racing down the road. Well, it turns out later that she's going to the hospital because her husband has gone into some kind of shock or something, and she has to get him there before he dies. And all of a sudden, when we see the sequence replayed, now we recognize that it's really quite frantic and has an air of tragedy about it. So again, the context has been changed. It hasn't really revealed something that was there all along. It's added information to the spatial situation that changes the meaning. That's an author's ploy. To add information, though, you need to withhold information in the first place. So the best way to go about this kind of thing is to figure out what it really is, and then figure out what information you can withhold to change the way it appears. Now, one other area here is the temporal. It's the very last area we're going to look in story weaving. The temporal version of interpretation, making the audience reinterpret what they've seen, and that is the flashback or flash forward. It differs, of course, from putting things out of sequence, because in a flashback or flash forward, the audience is in on it. The audience is aware that the flashback or flash forward is happening. Now, when this flashback or flash forward happens, like in Remains of the Day, for example, we see his life and what's going on out of order, act by act. We don't see it happen in the order in which it actually occurred. But unlike Betrayal with Ben Kingsley, we aren't led to believe that it's different, that it's a different order. We don't think we're seeing it in the proper order. We recognize we're seeing it in a different order, but we have to continually reinterpret rather than look at it as a changed context. So we go through and put things back in their particular order, and there we have the flashbacks and flash forwards. But There's a difference between flashbacks and flash forwards that are storytelling and such things that occur as looking into the past or into the future in story structure. For example, in Interview with the Vampire, that's a story in which the character is recalling what happened to him. He's going into his memory, and he's aware of the fact that he's going into the past to call back his memories and report on what happened. That's part of the story structure because the character himself is doing the traveling in time by relating what happened in the past through his recollections. Also, if you were to look towards the future like a Nostradamus or something who is predicting the future, someone who can see the future, in those stories about people who see crimes that are about to happen and they're plagued by it, that's part of the story's structure because the character is looking into the future. It's different than if you have a flash forward where the characters don't get to see the future, but we jump ahead and see what's going to become of them. That the little kid riding the tricycle who runs over a bug, that later on we see the kid as an adult driving along the car and knocking over some old lady on a dark street and laughing. We see that there's been a future scenario based on the scenario that we see in the present, but the kid doesn't see that. He's not involved. So in doing flashbacks and flash forwards, keep in mind, are you transporting the audience with their cooperation and awareness to the past or to the future to enhance your storytelling? Or is it the character recalling the past or predicting the future who is involved in a story structural item that's going to change the way they proceed through the story because of what they see in the future or what they call back from the past?